Hey, what's up, guys? Eric Carlberg here, datingcoachformen.com, and I have JT Tran of ABCs of Attraction with us today. JT, what's up, man?
Hey, Eric, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you doing this with me, man. I have known you for a while. I've known about you for a while, right? You've been a pretty big name in the dating coaching industry for many years. I believe when I first discovered this stuff around 22, 23 years old, you were starting coaching shortly after that. This is going back mid 2000s. Maybe you can tell me when you started, but I remember mid 2000s, JT Tran and ABCs of Attraction. And I always enjoyed your content. I always enjoyed watching your interviews. You've been on quite a few, uh, uh, what do you call it, broadcasts, And so it's just interesting for me to now be here in this position with you as I'm a coach now as well. And here I am with a guy that I followed in the mid 2000s. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess I'm one of the old war horses, so to speak. Born and raised during the old Project Hollywood days, the golden era of pickup. But yeah, I learned originally, at the knee of Mystery himself back in the day when his boot camps were just $600, inflation, right? And, it just kind of like grew from there where I gained a following because I was like one of the very few public Asian pickup artist, if you will. And like you said, I started gaining a following, did some TV, taught at some colleges, and then, had like a Chinese Canadian mother call me up to help out her son. And so thus was born the ABCs of Attraction, where my mission statement is to help my fellow Asian brothers when it comes to confidence, dating, and fighting racism.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you've really honed in on kind of a specific niche in the industry. And I believe that you're capable of coaching guys even outside that niche. I believe you work with guys of all backgrounds, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
you kind of
absolutely. European, white, black, Latin. It's just obviously because of what I look like this, short Asian dude. People see me and they're like, "Hey, if that sh little short Asian dude can do it, then I can do it." Right? It is one thing to see someone like, tall, white, and handsome versus someone that might look like them, but also have maybe the same background as them. Because I was born and raised in Texas, so I've experienced racism, as well as like not just from like the guys, the bullies, but also from women, sexualized racism. And
mm,
so people appreciate that I can meet them where they are, right? As opposed to like, someone who might be a male model, like trying to teach game.
Can you do you care to talk more about that, like sexualized racism that you experience?
Yeah, I mean, I've had everything from like girls making fun of like penis size. I like, view approach. And part of it as I look back was obviously when I was a newbie, my approach was off. So I was probably giving off a very bad vibe, a very nervous vibe or something like that. But I've literally had girls, be like, why would we want to talk, a little Asian guy with a small dick, right? And I've had like, guys cock block me out, call me like literally in the field, like, a gook or a chink or something like that. And obviously my students have experienced this as well. And, it is one of the, you probably aren't aware of this, maybe you are, but one of the sort of issues that affect the Asian American community is how much Asian women outmarry, right? Compared to like Asian guys. So statistically, that's 54% of American-born Asian women will outmarry. That's over half, right? And that leaves something on the order of like 1 out of 5 Asian American men, without possibility of, getting married. And so one of my things is I try to encourage my students to like date everybody. White, black, Latin, Asian. I want you to open up your entire dating pool to everybody. But that does mean that you do have to raise your skill level and not be thrown off when you might encounter like the racism because it's going to happen. I mean, sad to say, but it's going to happen.
Does it still happen often? Is it better than 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Do you think we've gotten better with that, or do you think it's still like really prevalent?
Well, it's like two steps forward, one step back, right?
Mm,
So, like the two steps forward is like, yeah, we kind of had a little bit more media representation, the Hollywood, and then there's K-pop phenomenon, the K-drama. So
mm,
that sort of expanded the possibility of Asian masculine expression. We weren't just relegated to being like the nerdy kung fu artist. Now you could be like the K-pop, the K-drama. Like, so it introduced a new aesthetic that some women, were attracted to. But on the other hand, when COVID happened, there was a very sort of large anti-Asian, backlash. Like
mm.
literally on some of these boot camps, we're all like Asian. Some of the clubs wouldn't let us in. Once they saw us, like we had booked a reservation.
Whoa.
Literally, they saw us and like, no. And they're like,
What?
they're like Chinese COVID, like, nope, not coming in. Um, and so, like the anti-Asian hate crimes went up by 1,000% during COVID. So, like I said, it's like two steps forward, one step back.
Wow, that is wild, man. Some of what you're discussing, like some of the statistics and stuff I have heard, and I work with Asian men as well. I don't specialize in it, but I will get an Asian client from time to time, right? Um, no, that's just so wild to me, man. And like the part that's hard for me to wrap my mind around is like I was not raised that way, and I grew up in a predominantly white suburban area of Chicago, and just it I didn't think that way. I was also a martial artist. I always held like Asian cultures in like a little bit of a high regard, right? Like because I was into to kung fu. I trained gong mao, kung fu, and a few other forms of martial arts, and like so I always viewed Asians. Forgive me for stereotyping here, but like very respectful, very smart, very hardworking. So I had all these positive stereotypes of Asians in my head, and actually for me, it was kind of the reverse. Like I had to learn, like when I went overseas, that like, just because somebody looks like a friendly, like smiling Asian person doesn't mean they're nice. Like there's some Asians out there, just like any race, that like you go to a big city, for example, you got to watch out for certain people, right? So I almost have the reverse. Like I have like a halo effect thing going on when I see an Asian. I'm like, oh, he must be like a super nice, respectful, smart, like disciplined person, right? So I guess maybe that is a form of like unconscious like bias in my head,
Yeah, I
but
mean, as we always say, like Asians were not like a monolith, but also people have different forms of unconscious bias, right? Whether, in your case, you were exposed to like the martial arts. So you grew up, having that sort of respect. But then you have like certain girls that in their upbringing, they might not have been necessarily exposed, but not like even exposed in a negative way. But at the same time, I call it like the dating cloud, like, the iCloud, right? And so if a woman, the majority of American women have never dated Asian, right? So they're going to draw upon their dating cloud. And where does, the idea of Asian masculinity come from in America? It's like typically what they see in Hollywood, right? The media, maybe what their friends have said, maybe what their girlfriends, what guys have said. And so their filter, if you will, of Asian guys is probably going to be different than what you see, what you think, and what you're raised as like a white guy. I'll give you an example. I was out with a infill with a student, and my student, he's from China, right? Directly from China, but he's like almost 6 foot tall. So tall, decent looking. He was dressed in a suit, kind of a youngish 22-year-old guy. And he's decent looking, right? But he does have a kind of heavy Asian Chinese accent. So there was this girl, like it was a three set, but there was like a tall, like blonde girl behind him. And said, like, hey, turn around and tell her she's beautiful. So he turns around and says, hello, you are beautiful, right? And the girl immediately latches onto the fact that he's a foreigner. And so she just literally just starts making fun of him, right? And goes into
mm,
the like, oh, me and my girlfriend, we're lesbians. Can we, take a strap on and fuck you in the ass? Right. And like it takes him a minute because obviously he doesn't know what lesbian, it takes a minute for him to translate that into Chinese.
mm,
But she is, it's that foreigner thing, right? It's
mm,
like, oh, let's make fun of the foreigner, right? So sometimes it might not even be of race, but like, oh, he's other. Now, again,
yeah.
this doesn't happen all the time, obviously, but it's out there without a doubt. And as guys, whether whatever color you are, like you have to be prepared to deal with that. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's reality, and we have to be prepared to deal with it.
Do you ever think that the sometimes the opposite could be true too, where like women may be even a little bit nicer to a guy that's got an accent and is like, you
Yeah.
know,
You can play off of the earnest, friendly immigrant, right? Especially like
mm,
during day game, when there will be times where how when someone might approach you and they're very nice, they're very earnest, they're obviously not a homeless person, but they're like they're super lost, right? And they're like, "Oh, could you help me?" And you're playing like no one wants to kick a puppy dog, right? And it's like,
mhm,
okay, I'll
mhm.
help you. And
Yeah.
so if you can lean into that, it makes you seem trustworthy. So there are ways to use like these sort of like stereotypes, like in a positive sense. Like for me, being short and Asian, I come off as very non-threatening, right? Which is why I prefer direct style game because I can do a lot more. I can be way more aggressive, way more assertive, way more dominant, way more touchy than say, for maybe for example, you. For example, like when I was in New York, I had a student. He was like a 6 foot tall white dude, right? MMA and like a big dude, right? And he sees me do my patented Asian Playboy caveman maneuver, right? I literally pick up the girl. Like, it's like, how much do you weigh? Oh, you're just a little baby. What you get? Like, I just literally pick her up, right? And she's like, woo! And she's screaming because it's a huge beachy spike. My white student, again, he's a 6 foot tall white guy, right? He sees this like, wow, like I want to do that. So the girl he's talking to, he just copies me and he just picks her up. And immediately the bouncer came running over and like,
Oh
put her
man.
down, put her down, put her down. Like they're immediately like, this guy's about to do something bad, right? But me, like no one thinks I'm gonna do something bad, right? So I can use that in my favor and just take things a lot more forward than someone that might be peer threatening, right?
Yeah, no, totally, man. And I think I do get that reverse sometimes for myself. Like I've had people tell me that I'm a good looking guy. I think that I'm like, if I'm being completely honest, like I'm maybe a little better looking than the average dude, but I'm not some super great looking guy, right? And like I can put on a little bit of weight sometimes, and if I'm unshowered and unkempt, like I'm not really that better looking than most guys, right? But I'm a little bit taller. I'm 6'1", almost 6'2". You know, I do feel like sometimes I don't know. I get this attitude, right? Like, oh, this guy thinks he's something, right? Like, I get one of two things. Like, women will either think that like I'm some sort of like cocky, bold, like confident, like dude, and then they're pleasantly surprised to learn that I have like a nice side, or I will come in a little bit too friendly, like nice guy, and then they're pleasantly surprised to learn that I have a little edge. So I guess it's like which side of my brain am I operating from and which lens are they looking at me through, right brain or left brain? I don't know. It's kind of this sphinx like thing. But yeah, no, that's I've seen that phenomenon, and it plays out not only with Asian guys, but like, sometimes, for example, again, I don't mean to stereotype here, but like if you're an African American dude, right? You can be a little bit more cheeky with like your directness, you know what I mean? And the girls almost expect it because there's kind of this stereotype that the African American dude is gonna like overtly flirt with them. So it's like, do you want to milk that a little bit,
Yeah, there's like a social context to it, right? There's a social understanding that, there are certain forms of like African American game, just like there is like the machismo form of game in like Latin culture, right? Like spitting game and like hollering at girls. In those particular cases, it can work within that context. And certain girls, like that's the type of game that they want spat at them, so to speak.
Mm,
It's just like especially for Asians, we don't have that sort of like oral tradition of dating,
mm,
especially if they're like moving immigrants over to America. Like what could have my, Vietnamese, stepdad have taught me about dating white girls in America? Like absolutely nothing, right? And then we look at the media and like, do we see ourselves in the media? Who do we pattern ourselves like forms of behavior of positive masculine role models? It's like for Asian guys, it's almost everybody says Bruce Lee. And hey, I fucking love Bruce Lee, right? He's the
Mhm,
man, but unfortunately, the man's been dead for like 50 years,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So who else do we role model ourselves after, right? Because
Yeah.
other cultures, they look at, the fathers, the uncles, the brothers, and so on and so forth. So,
So here we are with JT Tran, ABCs of Attraction. We had a little bit of an internet disruption, and we are back online again the next morning. But got a bunch of cool stuff to talk about. So JT, you were in the middle of talking about Asian role models and so forth. And I'll just hand it over to you. We just watched the last minute before the internet cut out, so you know where you were at. You go ahead and pick it back
yeah.
up.
I mean, I was just talking about like how for us Asians, it's mostly, Bruce Lee, that's the popular figure. But growing up in modern time, we don't have as many role models. And in fact, you know this, Eric, is that in many ways, as coaches, we sort of feel that void where pardon me, we sort of feel that void of being someone's like big brother, so to speak, to be, sometimes their quasi parental figure, because there isn't a lot of like, quote unquote safe spaces for men to be better because society stigmatizes so much the idea of self-development, self-improvement for us guys, especially for us Asian guys. So it's helpful in this space for us coaches to be able to allow like our students to see someone be successful in whatever areas of life, be it like fitness, finance, or dating girls. Again, I'm sure like Eric, you have the same kind of similar experience being their, big brother, so to speak, being their role model so they can pattern behavior of success.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point to the stigma attached with this. When people learn that men are learning the game, quote unquote, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I don't think we should gamify this. These are real people, right? But when people find out we're studying the dating game and learning strategies and tactics and whatever, I feel like some people, not all people, but often there's an immediate, like there must be something suspicious going on here, right? And, I do think there are sleazier elements of this field, right? The kind of dark corners of the pickup, scene and stuff. But my response to that is, have you ever seen a guy that doesn't study the game and how bad he is? So if you think it's um, creepy that guys are studying this and we're turning guys into creeps. No, we're trying to make guys less creepy. Yeah, the stigma attached to this, and where does the guy go? There are no resources. We are the resources. This is just yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that every sort of like subculture has some form of oral tradition when it comes to flirting. There's the African American style, you've got like the machismo Latino style, and simply because we call it game, it's just referred to maybe as differently in other cultures. Like the Gen Zs, what do they call it now? They call it Riz, right?
Do
Riz,
they?
and like all this old pickup terminology has simply been repackaged in the modern day Gen Z slang. What is it? Flirt to roast ratio. What is it? That's like the nag. You got your sigma, right? You got your two man. So all this terminology has simply been updated, right? I mean, yeah, you're correct that unfortunately in our industry and community, there are some bad actors, absolutely. But I believe, honestly, like the majority of guys who get into this, it is for self-development. It is so that they can be the best man that they want to be. It's just they've never been shown the way, or when they tried, they got like hammered down for trying to be different, right? It's all like the crabs in the barrel. It's like, oh, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna talk to girls, I'm gonna dress differently, and all of a sudden people make fun of them for it. But here we're trying to uplift men with hopefully without tearing other people, especially women, down.
Yeah. No, I relate to that a lot. And any guy that's kind of self-conscious about that, stepping into those new shoes, those new proverbial shoes, and showcasing himself in a different way, improving himself. What do you say to a guy like that for if he's afraid of that? Because that's a real thing too. I remember going through that myself, even when I felt like I was stepping up my game. I felt like people are going to notice I'm acting differently. And what do you say to that?
Well, sometimes it might be helpful to press a pause on those type of relationships if they might be toxic. right? I remember one of my students, William, who I had the fortune of actually presiding over his wedding. When he was learning game, he was working out, changing his hair, doing his hair, style and everything like that. But then all of his friends were making fun of him. They're like, "Oh, you look like a stereo monkey. Oh, you look gay. Oh, you're gonna embarrass us if you talk to that girl." And it was like so incredibly toxic. So he actually like cut them off. And now I'm not saying like cut off all your friends, but potentially, if they might be like very negative, you might just press pause on that relationship, go on your journey of self development, self improvement, and retouch base after a few months because sometimes that time between is enough for them to see, like, oh, yeah, he's changed. He's like, leveled up, so to speak. It's just that in like the micro, when they're seeing you every day and you're trying to make these adjustments and you're failing, right? Let's be realistic. There's a lot of missteps and failures as you learn and try to improve. And that just sort of reinforces their frame of the old you. But when you have like a time frame from the old to the new, they can attribute that. It's like, oh, he started working out. Good for him, right? So I'm not saying cut off your friends unless they're really toxic, but maybe press pause on that because this journey is hard enough without having like your so-called friends like put you down at every step of the way.
Yeah, your so-called friends, right? It's interesting to see how people respond to this, even when I announced to people, like, because for a long time I was doing my coaching kind of secretly. I didn't really want to broadcast it to everyone. And then, like, I remember when I announced it, it was like this big thing. I posted a video on Facebook, right? To everybody that I knew from high school, all my friends and family, coworkers, maybe 300 Facebook friends at the time, just small group of my tight knit friends. I posted a video telling them that I was a coach, and you get just some interesting responses to that. Or when I was coaching with Mystery, right? Because I have a relationship with Mystery. He's a business partner of mine, a wingman, mentor of mine. I remember one time I posted a picture, and I was looking for a little bit of a reaction, but I had my nails painted chrome and I had
Mm.
a beard ring in. Okay. Besides that, I was dressed how I would normally dress. I had a beanie on, I had a shirt, but I had a beard ring and chrome nails. And everybody's like, who does he think he is? It's like, wait a second. Like, I'm still Eric, I just painted my nails and, I'm going out with Mystery. It's like, if you were in a band, would you not just glam it up just a little bit for the stage? So it's such an interesting journey to see how people respond when you're trying to just level up.
Yeah, there's something where it's sort of like self-projection, right? They project their own insecurities onto other people, that which they don't like about themselves. And so when they see someone trying to improve, it reminds them that maybe their life isn't all that great. And when that happens, I try to take it with a little bit of grace. It's annoying, absolutely, but at the same time, I try to have the grace to understand, like, hey, they're just self-projecting their own insecurity. It isn't reflection of who I am, where I'm at. It's more of a reflection of them, right? So anyone
Mhm.
of you guys listening to this, like, this is unfortunately typically a private journey. But if you have friends, a support group, the people, the wingmen that you might meet on a program, like there's something to be said of that kind of brotherhood, that camaraderie of like having a wingman like Eric, where you guys get tested in like the fire of battle. Your metal is forged right there in the field of combat. There's something like very hearkening, like yeah, we got your back. We're gonna help, but we're in the trenches together, and that's what's really rewarding is when you can have that support group.
Yeah. And it does feel like you're in the trenches. Some people hear that and they're like, dude, it's just dating. It's just talking to girls. And it's like, no, if you have approach anxiety, even if you somewhat deal with your approach anxiety, you're somebody who's actually engaging women that you're sincerely attracted to, and you're not cherry picking your approaches. You're going in, even when it's sometimes a difficult set. It can feel very much like you're on the front line of a battle. It's an epic spiritual battle. I think most people can relate to that. As you said, some people are going to judge it, but really they're just projecting their own worldview on that, right? Um, So I'm going to ask you this too, JT. Can you tell us a little bit more about your coaching style? So, like in the dating community industry, we have like structured game and natural game. Are you like a proponent of one or both of those styles? Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I guess what I label or describe my ABCs of attraction system is what I call holistic, which, might fall more into the structured realm as you described it. In this case, I teach like inner game, outer game, and verbal game because you have to remember like a lot of my students who are Asian, we're not monolithic. We're not like all Asian American. Like I've literally had boot camps where no one spoke English as their first language. So could
Wow.
you imagine like, all these Asian guys in their fobby accent looking very international, just going up to girls like, you are fucking beautiful. Like trying to teach them really sort of belabored routines as much as they might be effective, like the verbal skills aren't going to be there and they're not going to be there for like probably a minimum of a year as they work on the accent and, being more of a verbal expert. But at the same time, I'll have Asian Americans who were born in America, understand American culture, understand American fashion, humor, dating culture, but because they were raised in America and they were exposed to racism and internalized racism at an early age, they're tall, they're good looking, all of that, but mentally they feel inferior. And so they might have all the physical traits of being successful, but mentally we have to work on their inner game. And so this is why like I try to create a stable foundation, right? To make sure like that their thought process, their emotional, anxiety management is, level, their ability to talk, hopefully, get them at a certain level, and their physical game, their ability to display, attractive qualities and body language. Like I tell all my students, you might not speak English, but the one universal language that everybody speaks on this planet is body language, right? And so what I teach is, laying that foundation. And then, I have an entire system like A, B, C, D, E, F, right? It's a simple acronym. Like pretty much anybody can remember it if you know your alphabet. And so like A, for example, is attitude. Like the battle's lost or won, in your head and in your heart. Like if you're already thinking like, oh, I'm too short for her, she's not gonna like me, or I'm too Asian, like you've already lost the battle. So we work on drills in order to like work with your mind. And then the attract part, right? Your passive value, your body language, because attraction happens before you even open your mouth, right? And then the approach, what you actually say to the girl. So it goes from A, B, C, D, E, F, and I'm sure we can all figure out what F stands for, right? And that's the ABCs of attraction. So I try to go, it's structured, but like well-rounded and holistic because you have to remember my first client was a Chinese Canadian mother who wanted me to help out her teenage son who had been harassed by neo-Nazis. So I knew I wanted to give him some structure, but I knew also I didn't want to pigeonhole him into a very limited use case because if all he did was just memorize lines, how would he grow into it when he became like a man, right? So enough training wheels, but enough flexibility for people to grow their own personality into it. So I'll teach indirect, direct style, night game, day game. I believe, as Bruce Lee said, it's about coming in with a cup that is empty and not full. Learn what you need, take what is useful to you, and you can just forget the rest.
That's great. So it sounds like you have like specific tactics and techniques, but then they fit into like broader systems and structures. And then you encourage flexibility and adaptability, which is, similar to what I do as well. That's, I think that's the way to do it. So, uh, yeah, good stuff. So continuing on this trend, are you more of a proponent of direct game, indirect game? Do you teach a mix of that? Like, what are your stances kind of on direct and indirect?
Well, it's two cases, right? There's my own personal preference, and then there is what is more useful to the student in their context, right? So if a student is a complete newbie, I would say start with indirect because that allows you to concentrate on getting a handle of your approach anxiety, learning crowd control, energy, and bantering skills. right? It is a very low investment, low rejection, low fear type of opening. So if you're someone that is completely terrified of approaching, doing the classic opinion opener is a great start. You learn how to control the crowd if it's multiple people. You learn how to be funny, all of that. Uh, my own personal preference is direct style. Like one of my go-to direct openers is what I call a kamikaze is like, you are fucking beautiful, right? And it is something that I definitely highly recommend for all non-classically good-looking guys, especially, if you're like me, short and Asian, because what that does is it breaks her heuristics, right? The heuristics is the mental shortcuts that people take in order to make a very complex decision within a short amount of time. So if she's drawing upon her dating cloud of knowledge of like what she knows of like Asian men, probably some negative stereotypes from like Hollywood and the media. But when I go in, or when my students go in with their broken accent and say, "You are fucking beautiful," it just blows their mind, right? And she has to evaluate you as an individual male, as opposed to if you look like a stereotype, you walk like a stereotype, and you talk like a stereotype, guess how people are going to treat you? Like a stereotype. So when you kind of go balls to the walls, that person has to go like, "Oh, that is so different. Okay, like who is this person in front of me?" So, it varies to the individual. This is why I like to start with indirect for like the beginners and, slowly work our way up to more direct style.
I love it, man. And what you're doing there too is you're opening kind of with a pattern interrupt, right? So, like you said, it disrupts her heuristics and it just kind of snaps her out of any preconceived notions. That's kind of like NLP 101, right? It's like pattern interrupt. So, I love that I can talk about these concepts with you too, direct, indirect. You've been in this for a long time. Like, you know, all of these concepts inside and out. And, yeah, I try to do the same thing. I try to take kind of a multi-dimensional approach with my clients where we can do direct, we can do indirect. I'm really not uh I'm not adherent to just one style of game over the other. I also have my preferences too. But really my preferences change. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you just want to go direct, and sometimes like, you know what? I just want to socialize a little bit more broadly. I like to think of that almost as zone two cardio. So zone two cardio is where we're doing cardio, but we're not pushing ourselves to exhaustion. We're just kind of getting our heart rate up a little bit. So I think that's good for guys to that's how I think of social circle game, really, which is actually what I wanted to ask you next is, are you generally a proponent of social circle or cold approach, or once again both? What are your thoughts on social circle and cold approach?
It's been dependent upon, like, where and when I am in my life. Like, obviously, I started way back in the day of, like, Project Hollywood doing cold approach, and then for a time, I had moved back to Texas, and I did a lot of social circle, nighttime social circle, where I befriended, like, a lot of the nighttime denizens, became friends with a lot of promoters, bartenders, like, waitresses, strippers, that entire kinda, stratospheres, in Dallas. And it's very interesting if you've never done that, right? To network, but also to see like how like these groups of people have very attractive, female friends, or you're sort of like, oh, are you dating so and so, or like I'll bring these girls to your party, you bring these girls to that party, yada yada, right? Like here in LA, it's a little bit different because our city is so spread out. Like you have to be like super sort of like centered in you're either Hollywood or you're Santa Monica or you're downtown LA. Very rarely will people mix between the areas of the city just because of the traffic and how far it is. So more LA based, I tend to be more code approached, centered, but I have done a lot of social circle style game. And then when we travel, the idea of like when we're going to Latin America or going to Europe is we create like a very fast, if you will, sort of social circle like funneling system of like just meeting a lot of girls, throwing parties, and having them at a party so we can social proof ourselves, have that kind of status. And so, going back to what you're saying is like once you reach a certain level, like us, we can be flexible to the moment or location or context, what we're feeling. There's sometimes I'll be like, I just want to be a bad boy, so I'm going to dress like a bad boy, or I want to suit up, or like I want a good girl, I want a bad girl. We're able to adjust to the moment instead of like, always being stuck in one lane or the other.
Yeah, I love it. And like you said too, I feel like it really depends on the student where if he's got more approach anxiety, maybe you're going to kind of nudge him more towards the social circle, indirect side. Because I actually believe indirect cold approach is more closely related to social circle game than it is to like direct cold approach, if it's done properly. So, uh, yeah, I think, and then if there's a guy that just, he wants to snap out of his current mode, he wants to just put his nose to the grindstone and jump out of that airplane, cold approach, right? Uh, direct cold approach, even, let's get those nerves out of the system and break some eggs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what about how do you encourage guys, especially, and again, I'm not meaning to stereotype here because this issue affects men of all different backgrounds, but escalation, like making the transition from this is a fun like conversation to, hey, I'm interested in you in in more ways than just a friendly conversation. How do you encourage guys to bridge that gap? Do you have tactics, techniques, systems for bridging the escalation gap, if you will?
Yeah, and that's a great question, especially for my Asian students who aren't raised in a very sort of like physical upbringing of touch. And there's like a lot of fear, especially in or more sort of politicized climate. People, guys especially, are scared of like they touch. It might come off as like harassment. So what I prefer, and this comes from my own experience because I don't really get a lot of indicators of interest like IOIs because I'm not like a male model, as I always like to say. I might have wished to be born tall, dark, and handsome, but I've settled for being short, stunning, and smooth. But
I
generally
think you're
speaking,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I think you're better looking than you give yourself credit for, man. You're
I
looking pretty good.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I
All right.
appreciate that. But generally speaking, like girls don't like hit on me or show a lot of IOIs. Maybe if I'm like really dressed up. So instead, what I do is I build up sort of like this compliance ladder, right? I'll start small, right? Might lead her around. Um, I might be like, oh, it's like rush hour. Here, let's step over here to the side. Going from the bar to maybe to like over in the corner and slowly build up from general to more sexualized, where now we're sitting down. Okay. Once we're sitting down, I can do a lot more because a lot more private. It's a lot more, intimate. And then here I might like have, things are going good. We either do like a handhold, arm in arm, or maybe throw her arm around my shoulder and maybe get her to kiss me on the cheek. And notice what I'm doing is I'm making her escalate on me, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not trying to make the move per se, but I'm leading her. And then she's giving me like the go signal. So imagine if a girl is sitting in my lap, I say like, best seat in the house, right? Sit on Papa's knee. She's sitting on my knee, throws her arm around my shoulder, has kissed me on the cheek. What is the likelihood of me being able to kiss her on the lips and make out with her? It's really high at that point because I've led her to do that, but she has chosen, she has consented to do all of that, right? So instead of me trying to guess, should I not kiss her? Is she gonna like it? Bro, like if she's sitting in my lap, arm around my shoulder, already kissing me on the cheek, 99 out of 100, you can make out with her. So I don't really try to guess at the sexual escalation. I lead her and I let her give me the go signals because she's escalating on me. Because at the end of the night, especially if we're going to take her home, I want her to think that it is her idea to seduce me. It is her idea that she took me home, right? Instead of like you having to do all the work. Because this is ultimately like a two-way street. It's a two-way dance, right? In the beginning, yes, you have to do the majority of the talking. But I want up to a certain point, once I've got the traction, I want her to try to win me over, right? I want her to start seducing me. And by doing the sexual compliance test, you are really eliminating the guesswork. I don't need to guess if she wants me to kiss her. Like I already have her kissing me. Now I just close the deal.
I love that. You're getting them to baby step it so then it's not such a blind leap into the unknown. I remember being in high school and even before high school, maybe even junior high, where I was unsure if the girl was ready to be kissed, right? And I
Oh
would
yeah.
sort of just close my eyes and leap into the unknown. Here we go. adrenaline pumping, you know. Then as soon as that kiss lands too, man, I'm like, my heart is beating out of my throat and into the kiss. And I'm sure she can feel my heartbeat and my adrenaline, you know. And luckily, women are largely very forgiving in this department. You know, they realize that we weren't given a roadmap to this stuff. So you don't have to have the perfect kiss, right? As long as it's within a normal range. If you're really uncalibrated, you may get a girl be like, whoa, right? But
Yeah.
so I had a lot of forgiving girls probably when I was going through that experimental phase, but you really have shortcutted that process by giving them like baby steps, like loop the arm around, get her sitting close to you, and then, you know, and I mean, to some people that sounds so intuitive, well, like duh, like make it smooth, right? But no, to a lot of guys, we need that step by step, that procedure list, if you will. And it sounds like you have a very solid map that you give guys.
Yeah, like I like going off what you're saying. I remember, like in high school, trying to go on like a movie date with a girl, and I did the, should I, should I, should I, should I? Oh, like it was horrible, right? I didn't know what to do. But again, people forget that not everybody is taught this, right? If whether you're born like shy or maybe very religious or like Asian conservative, whatever, we were not taught this. So somewhere along the line, we have to learn it because confidence is not something that you just read, right? You actually have to do it. But like you were saying, I want to lead her and she chooses to escalate on me, and then all I have to do is essentially close the deal. It's no longer guesswork, right?
Love it, man. Love it. I so yeah, this kind of ties back into like one of the things that we were first talking about when people first learn about our industry and they're like, you really give guys like tactics and techniques and systems, and it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, if I work with a guy and he has natural social skills but he's just buried beneath a bunch of fear or limiting beliefs or whatever, okay, let's target that fear, let's work on his inner game, and then let's see where his actual game is at once we do that. And if he's off to the races, he doesn't need the systematized advice, fine, I'm all for getting a guy from point A to point B, right? But what I think separates coaches like ourselves, if I may throw myself in that mix as well, and coaches like you know, like we do have the systems and tactics and techniques because they're needed for a lot of guys. You know, you can't just tell every guy, oh, just get out of your head, you'll be fine, or just go get warmed up. It's like he goes and gets warmed up, he gets over his approach anxiety, but he still doesn't have the skill. It's like I could tell you to get out of your head and don't be so self-conscious and then jump in a boxing ring. But if you don't have any boxing, you know, training under your belt, you're just going to be a confident guy with no skill, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that in our industry, because there's no barrier of entry, right? Like anybody can claim to be a coach. But in order to effectively be your PUA guru, dating coach, whatever you want to call it, it takes a variety of skills. So part of it is like the ability to get up there and teach. Part of it is like the coaching. Part of it is the ability to demonstrate actual infield ability. Part of it is like therapy, right? And the ability to understand the perspective of that student, of his particular circumstance. So with me, like obviously I can understand someone who's short, I can understand someone who's Asian, but also I can sort of understand someone who's tall, someone who understands white, black, whatever, because I've seen it, right? And I have the hopefully the ability to be empathetic and putting myself in their shoe and not simply believe that my lived experience is the only valid form of experience, right? And so the way a person is treated when they're short is different from the way that someone is treated who is tall, race, blah, blah, blah. And so our ability to see that and to adjust our viewpoint and our coaching to be tailored to that particular student is what separates from like the mediocre coach to a more like advanced practitioner, right?
Yeah, and I want to talk about this as well. So when a guy comes to you and he has these, let's say he's Asian, let's say he's just some other guy with some sort of limiting beliefs, or he falls into some stereotype. For example, like we get a lot of guys in our industry that are short, right? It's very common to get a client that's on the shorter side, right? Some coaches will just say like, "Oh, don't worry about it," or "Forget about it," or whatever. Like, what are some of your strategies for getting a guy to like kind of acknowledge his limitations but not like dwell on it? Like, you know what I mean? Because I'm not the guy who's going to lie to my Asian clients and say, "No, dude, like women love Asian guys," right? Like, no, if you look at the data, there's pretty much like there's data to support that Asian guys have it a little tougher in the dating
Yeah.
arena, right? So, how do you like strike that balance between like acknowledging a guy's uh, uh, like real like barriers that he has to kind of break through, and also like encouraging him that it's doable?
Yeah, like obviously I have the advantage myself being 5'5", so when they see me, it gives them a little bit of hope, right? If JT could do it, like then I can do it. Um, so that's one thing, and also, like you said, like acknowledging that heightism is a real thing, right? But it is what it is. Just like we judge women on their physical beauty, so we too are going to be judged, right? Both genders, we do that. Now, how to overcome that in a practical setting when it comes to like attracting girls, this is where a couple of things come into play. Is one, this is also why I like direct game. Like when I see a 6 foot tall girl, like I'll just go in because it's exciting. I love that. And we are so different that typically I will get a very positive response like the majority of the time. Secondly, things you could do, I would say like you have a bigger command presence. Now, this requires a little bit more, maybe intermediate level skill set because you have to work on your body language, your facial expressions, your tonality, how you move, how you act, how you walk, how you talk, such that you give a command presence. Your personality is much bigger than you actually are. Like I have had so many girlfriends that like they never really realized that I was shorter than them because like quote unquote I felt bigger. Emotionally I felt bigger than they were, right? Um Going into like the classic protector of loved one attraction switch, making them feel really secure that they are protected by me, whether that's when you're walking them on the street, making sure you're walking in the outside of the street so they're on the inside, or doing the king and queen kind of promenade. Again, doing these things that make them feel safe. Like very, if you want to get really nitty gritty, you get your body language standing tall. A lot of guys slouch, especially in the tech industry. They have that tech neck, right? Kind of always lean. Wearing your hair up to sort of give you like, maybe an inch, and going for boots, going for like Calcio or elevator shoes. I know there's a stigma, especially in the West, but a couple things. It's those elevator shoes are very popular in Asia, right? There's not that stigma associated with it. So you go to Korea and these guys, like, they all seem like they're 6 foot tall, but no, like, they have like these 3-inch boots. But also, here in America, where there's that stigma, people don't realize a lot of shoes have an inbuilt like 2 inches. Like a lot of like the basketball sneakers, you look at Yeezys, those are 2 to 3 inches. But people don't want to say like, oh, he's wearing Yeezys just to appear taller. Like, no, that motherfucker isn't that tall. It's just the Yeezys giving them 3 inches. It's just that it isn't advertised. So like those basketball, some of those, on the court, they might not actually be that tall. They just happen to have sneakers that give them 2 to 3 inches. So don't be ashamed about wearing that. Like it's not an issue. Like people, I always get this. Like, well, what if you take her home and you take off your shoes and like, oh my God, you're short. Well, first of all, you take her home. That's like most of the battle right there. So why are you worried about like, this future projection? And secondly, no girls ever asked. Like I said, to me, to them, emotionally felt bigger to them. So it's never an issue. So yeah, there are a lot of ways to like from a practical point of view to offset. It's never gonna go away, but as I always say, if I can do it, 5'5", short little Asian guy can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah, that's interesting how you will create different effects on people depending on how dialed in you are. So I can relate to that in the sense that I have some friends that are on the shorter side. I'm thinking of one in particular. I never thought of him as a shorter dude until one day he brought it up. Like he brought it up somehow in a conversation in a passing way. And I thought to myself, He is a bit on the shorter side. I've never viewed him as a shorter dude until he brought it up. I literally just, I don't know if I'm oblivious to it. Maybe I'm like not so aware, or he just did a good job of, I don't want to say overcompensating, but like just ever so slightly having a few cheats in there. So like, having those boots, standing your hair up a little bit taller. Um, there's a fine line between uh, compensating just a little bit and overcompensating. And can you talk a little bit about that too? Because like I do believe that if a guy's a little bit shorter, yeah, beef up just a little bit, wear those boots, spike your hair up, like do a few things to nudge yourself up in that department. It's most importantly behavioral, right? Um, but there are the guys that sort of take it too far, where there's clearly some kind of overcompensating here going on, and that's pretty transparent, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I would also say, as my date game coach Ozzy likes to put it, you don't know where the edge is until you step off, maybe step off a couple of times as well.
Mm.
So once you are more calibrated and you understand, like, hey, I'm maybe doing a little bit too much, then you can back off, right? In general, like behaviorally, I always try to lead, they act of like dominance. And so maybe you're isolating a girl, I would be like, "Hey, let's go over there. Let's have a seat. Lead the way." And so in action, I would take a much more proactive stance of accomplishing something, movement, physical escalation, leading the way such that they take the role of a follower, of submissive, if you will. And in that way, and also taking like a protector role, even if it's small things. Like, honestly, I've had girls felt like they felt so incredibly secure. I remember I was in Mykonos, right? It's a Greek tourist town, like very like high net worth uh resort city. And I did all these things. He's like, "Oh, I felt really safe." Like, this is Mykonos. It's not like there are gangs roaming the street or anything like that where she really need to feel protected. But I just made it sort of like a thing that I would do these sort of protective elements that made her really feel secure emotionally with me. So it's definitely embodying that act of, you might not be a big guy, but you have, if, put it this way, like a big heart, right?
I love it. I love that idea of overshooting the mark a little bit too, because yeah, you don't know where the line is if you don't cross it. And to do even just like a sales analogy, right? Like let's say you're selling some kind of product or service. If you if you can't be like right on the mark, is it better to be a little bit more confident in your product or a little bit less? So I would say, like you said, be a little bit more confident, speak with a little more conviction, really own that moment. And then ideally what we're going for is like true confidence. You know what I mean? So that's like if we can't hit that mark, you're better off having a little bit more belief in yourself, acting with a little bit more conviction, or a lot if you really, because some people think that they're pushing the boundary and like, no, dude, you need to really step up your confidence here. You need to really own these moments, right? Um, all this rings true to me, man. Just like I said in the beginning of this interview yesterday, right? Because we had our little internet disruption. I've known who you were for a long time, man, and you know your stuff. You're not just somebody who teaches this. You're somebody who's studied this himself and trained intensely. So this is not just, oh, this is a cool industry. Let me learn how to teach this. You trained it yourself, like a martial artist that trained martial arts himself, and then started teaching his martial art. Um, I love it. Um, what else, man? Do you have more time? You still have some more time here? Or do you got to roll?
I've got a little bit of time. If you want to go for like another 10 minutes, just, I've got to head out for my next appointment.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, why don't you tell people watching this about what you have going on right now with your coaching, any like upcoming programs, products, and so forth. And by the way, anybody that signs up for JT's programs or coaching or whatever, mention that you were referred by me, Eric Carlberg, datingcoachformen.com, and JT will give some sort of a discount.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your training and how guys can find you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Eric. Like Eric was saying, anyone who is interested in one of our boot camps, which is a weekend live training program, if you say, like, use a discount code, let's say dating coach for men, right? Or Eric Carborg, you'll get $500 off of our boot camp. And basically it's a weekend training where you get a pre-boot camp home study course, coaching call, like all ready to get you, hit the ground running. The weekend course, we have classroom, you get like a 200-page workbook. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we go infield Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday day game. And then there's after boot camp support as well. And normally it's like $3,000, but again, if you put down dating coach for men, the discount code, you'll get $500 off. And then we have like other programs. We have our Latin tour, which is like the Great Romantic Adventure, and our Euro tour, which is what I call the #1 inner game experiential event for Asian men, where we take what it is like to game without a lot of sexualized racism and really deconstruct a lot of your limiting beliefs, because we do inner game workshops like every single day. And that way you can come out of it with a new belief system, completely reconstructed, where if you have like a lot of insecurities or what have you, hopefully they have been like totally recontextualized, and such that you come out of it like a new man. You're thinking differently, you're feeling differently. It is kind of like our crown jewel in our list of programs. So that's the Euro Tour. And then for anyone interested, we have an online academy, sort of like a virtual classroom of advanced lectures, infield quizzes, and it runs the gamut from pickup to confidence to skincare to fashion to how to propose to your fiance, or even choosing who's the one, and raising kids. And it's over like 50 hours at this point. And the first 30 days is free. If you want to sign up for our academy program, we have a special offer for like 30 days free, cost of a Netflix subscription if anyone's interested in trying that out. So, yeah, Eric, I definitely appreciate coming onto your show and, talking about like really like drill down. A lot of times these interviews, as much as I enjoy talking to everybody, like this ability to go really into the weeds at some of the things that other people only gloss over, I think is really rewarding to the guys watching this that really want to get into the brass tacks.
Yeah, it's been a great time chatting with you, JT. And you have some great offers on the table. Who can beat free too? Go try it out for free, guys. There's nothing to lose there. Uh, Amazing, JT. Thank you so much for doing this interview, brother. And I would like to, at some point in the future, collaborate with you on something too. I don't know if we can make some instructional videos, or if we can do some boot camps or what have you. But we should hash that out one day and do some kind of collaboration. That'd be really cool. So,
Yeah, I'd be absolutely down with it.
all right, guys. JT Tran, ABCs of Attraction. Check him out. JT, I'll see you, brother.
Thank you.